So this is the carbon cycle. Probably best to start off in terms of plants. Now, plants are what we would call producers, more particularly autotrophs, which means that they produce or make their own food. How do they do that? Well, in order to do that, they use carbon dioxide. Now, notice here carbon dioxide, the way it's written, with a little 2, a subscript 2. Carbon dioxide contains the element carbon. Carbon is really important for living things. It's used in plants to make carbohydrates, sugars and starch. It's used to make lipids, which are things like fats and oils, and it's used to make proteins. It's a kind of building block. In fact, we often refer to plants and animals on Earth as carbon-based. So the first step in our carbon cycle is the idea that plants can take up carbon dioxide, and this process is called photosynthesis. So plants take in the carbon dioxide, use it to make sugars, proteins, lipids, whatever it may be. Now, animals can't make their own food, and animals belong to the group of organisms we would call heterotrophs, which means they had to eat something as their source of carbon. So animals would eat plants, and that's how they'd get their carbon, and they could then use that to make their own carbohydrates, their own lipids, and their own proteins, and whatever else is needed. Now, one of the key uses of carbon compounds are what we might call organic compounds, which simply means a molecule containing carbon, is respiration. It's a really important process. Now, you don't have to remember this for the exam, but it's worth putting down anyway. Respiration is not breathing, it is the breakdown of food. Often we'll write it as glucose or sugar, but it could be protein, it could be lipid. And we need oxygen to be present. And it is broken down into carbon dioxide, water, and it releases energy. This is a really important formula in science. It's always worth remembering. Okay, remembering that the food could be anything. It could be sugar, glucose, you'll often see it written as, but it could be proteins and lipids as well. Now, this is a way that carbon dioxide can get back into the atmosphere. So both plants and animals put carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere in the process of respiration. There are a few other ways that carbon dioxide can get back into the atmosphere. Now, one of the natural ways is a volcano. Volcanic eruptions actually release tremendous amounts of carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere. So there's one possible route. Another route is from combustion. Now, combustion is just a scientific term for burning. When plants and animals die, very often their remains will be decomposed, so they'll be broken down by bacteria and fungi. If, however, the remains end up underground, and over long periods of time, tens of hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, their remains can become what we would call the fossil fuels, which is coal, oil and gas. Now, these are the things that we burn in power stations and in cars, of course. We burn petrol. So combustion of fossil fuels is another possible way that carbon dioxide gets back into the atmosphere. Now, there is one more part to this, just to make life a little bit more complex, and it's marine ecosystems. And a marine ecosystem just means an ecosystem at sea. Why is it different? Well, it turns out that carbon dioxide can be absorbed into water. In fact, the oceans are a massive store of carbon dioxide. There's a lot of carbon dioxide stored up in there, absorbed, it's present in the water. Of course, we've also got in the water what we might call phytoplankton, which are tiny marine organisms that can photosynthesize. So they would be taking carbon dioxide out via photosynthesis. We've also got animals in the sea, which would be eating the phytoplankton as their source of food. And of course, just like with our land ecosystem, these organisms are also respiring, they're also dying and becoming part of the fossil fuel system. And let's just put that last bit in there. Remember the respiration that we had from plants and animals. Of course, marine plants and animals will also be respiring. So that's another source of respiration, to put carbon dioxide back in the atmosphere. So to summarise it, think about the ways that carbon dioxide can go into plants and animals, and then think of the ways that carbon dioxide can be released back. They're all linked together. This is essentially photosynthesis. The other routes are things like respiration and combustion.